Today we're taking a look at lockpick. This is the beta version, and we're going to go over the rules briefly and then take a walkthrough of the gameplay itself. So I have my cards here, but you can use standard cards, and I'll show in the description which numerical values you need for those. There's 18 cards. We'll need a dry erase marker or a pen or a pencil if you don't have a laminated copy of this. We need 4 dice. Doesn't matter what color they are. And we're going to use a number of tokens, little markers. These 8mm cubes work great. Again, it doesn't matter what color they are. I have chosen just different colors so that we can keep track of what's going to be used for what. I'll put a purple one on this star here in the middle of the tension track, and we'll go over the different areas of the board here in a moment. I'll put a blue one here on the pick height, choosing which pick I'm going to use, and a yellow one beside pin 1 here, and an orange one at the top of the binding track here, and a couple of others for helping mark spots on the setting grid. So the other thing we need to do to set up is to shuffle our cards, and I've done that. And we're going to lay out as many cards as we want the difficulty to be. So an easier version is with 4 pins, so 4 cards. A standard game is with 5 cards, 5 pins, and a more difficult version is with 6 pins. So we're going to go with 5 pins today. So I'm going to put the first one down here, and to help line them up a little bit better, you can put them off to the side just for a moment and then put them in place. So that's 5 cards, and just for aesthetics, I'm going to finish the stack with the card that we're not actually going to use, but that's just going to finish off the look of the lock here. Okay, and we don't need these cards for the rest of the game. Let's take a look at the components of the board and see what the main mechanisms that we're going to be using. Around here, this is the time track. These are the time spaces, and we have 30 of them available to use before we run out of time and the game is over. So we start by marking off the one with the star. We mark off sequentially the time spaces around, and if we've marked off the last one and our set of pins is still not all picked and set, then we've lost. So the goal of the game is to pick each of the pins that we have in our lock. And we do that one by one, starting with pin 1. What we do is we check to see if the pin is binding. And in the lock terms, that's a way of looking at putting a bit of pressure on the pin with the pick and to see if there's a little bit of friction there. And if there's friction there, that means that that's a good pin to set, or in other words, to push up with the pick, and that will lock that pin in place. Then we can move on to the next pin. So again, we're going to check a pin for binding. If it's binding, we're going to note the sequence that the pins are binding in, the binding order here. And then once a pin is binding, we do that by moving along the binding track here, and I'll explain that when we get to it. Then we try to set the pin, and we set the pin by marking intersections on this grid here, and we'll get into more details about that. Now, the whole time that we're marking spaces along the time track here, there are icons that indicate tension. And with this tension tool, we need to be maintaining a certain amount of tension on the core of the lock the whole time in order to make the picking possible. We can give that lighter tension or harder tension, but right in the middle is the best. And you can see that that has a cost of 1, and we'll explain what the cost is for later. But if you're closer to the edges, then the cost of adjusting the intersections on the setting grid goes higher. Again, we'll explain how that works. So why don't we just get started, and we'll see how we get along, and we'll explain the mechanisms as they come up. So the first thing we're doing is checking pin 1 for binding. So I'm going to put a B here And this purple pen is working a little bit better than the red pen I had originally. So to check for binding, what we're going to do is we're going to roll one die at a time, 3, and we're going to mark that many spaces along the binding track here. So 1, 2, 3. Now you could just have that. You don't necessarily need this marker. You could just have 3 in your head and be like, okay, we're on that dash or hyphen. But the hyphen or dash means that we don't know whether the pin is binding yet or not. It could be or it couldn't be. So we're going to keep rolling dice until we either land on a check mark or a red time space. 3. 1, 2, 3. So we're at spot 6. I'm going to roll another time. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh dear. So because we landed on the stopwatch, we're going to mark an X on here and then move on to pin number 2 to check for binding. But before we do that, we've noticed that we've crossed off a space with the tension icon. So what we need to do next is to check the tension and adjust if necessary. So the way we do that is we roll all 4 dice at a time, and you can say it says 3 rolls of 4 dice. So just like Yahtzee rules, we have 3 opportunities to roll a subset of these dice to try and get a low sum if we can. So our sum currently is 11. That means that we would be within this tension track. And if we accepted those values, then we would mark off a space, the first space on the tension track. So we could accept this value of 7 through 11, but I'm going to try and see if we can get down to 4 to 6. So I'm going to take these 2 dice and re-roll them. And that was worse. So I'm going to try rolling a third time. And that was pretty bad. So we have 9, 11, 13. So 13 is actually on this track. So what we do is we mark this off and we move our tension marker 1 spot to the right. So now when we're setting pins, if we were to adjust the intersections, it would cost 2, and we'll explain that when we get to it. But the next thing we want to do is check pin 2 for binding. So we're going to write a B here. We're going to reset our binding token, and we're going to start rolling 1 die at a time. In the corner, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hooray! So we've landed on a check mark. So that means that our pin is binding. So what we're going to do is we're going to mark a 1 here. So this is the first, pin 2 is the first pin to bind, and it's the first pin that we're going to set. So the first thing that I do is I take this card and I flip it over so that we can see what the lift height is. And it's a little awkward dealing with these cards, but so we have a binding height of 9, which is quite high. And what that means is on the setting grid, we're going to roll 4 dice, one after another, one at a time, and we're going to look at intersections of 2 dice. So let's say we rolled a 4 and a 2, and we wanted to look at the intersection for that. So we've got a column 4 here, and we're in row 2. So the intersection of that is a value of 2. Now we're going to have 2 intersections. So let's say we have 5 and 4. So that's column 5, intersection 4. So that's 6. So we could place our markers on here. So we've got a 6 and a 2. Now 6 plus 2 is 7. That is less than 9. So that's not enough for us to set the pin. We're looking for that exact value. So what we would be looking for is an intersection that might be something like 5 and 4 or 6 and 3. Now, because this value is quite high, what we could do is change our pick for a higher pick, which would add 1 to our intersections, and it would make it so that we only need to get an 8 on the grid plus 1 for this increased pick height in order to add up to 9. Now, we have to make a decision whether we want to change the pick before we start setting. So let's write down an S so we know that we're setting the grid. And I think I am going to change our pick height to be increased 1. So I'm going to move our marker down to the 1 pick height, a higher pick, deeper pick. And I'm going to mark 2 P's on the time track. Now we need to stop again because we've hit another tension adjustment. So before we can actually do the setting on the grid, we're going to check and adjust our tension. Ideally, we're looking for something that we're going to bring our tension back towards the middle. So we're ideally going to go for a 7 to an 11. So this is currently 5 plus 6 is 11, and that's exactly what we want. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to mark this one off, and we're going to move our tension adjustment back to the center. Okay, now we can finally move on to setting the pin, and because we've already marked down our S on the time track here, we don't need to mark any more spots. So what am I looking for on the grid? I'm looking for something that's going to add up to 8, because remember we've got 8 in the grid plus 1 for our pick height here to add up to 9. Whoops, that was a 2. We could either put this die here to mark a row or here to mark a column. Which is going to be better for us? Well, we've got 3, 1, 2, 0, 5, and 6 on this. We've got 4, 1, 5, 2, 4, 3 on this. These ones seem to be a little bit more in the middle range. That's going to hopefully let us get to a value of 8. So I'm going to use the row 2 for that one. 1. Okay, so I could start this second intersection with column 1 or row 1, or I could finish intersection A and choose this spot here, because this is at row 2, column 1. So our first spot would be 4, and that's a good value for if we're trying to get 8, because then we just need to look for another 4 on the grid. So I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to put this here, marker here, just to remind ourselves that that's the spot that we've selected. We don't have to, we could just look at the dice again to see where we are, but sometimes that can be helpful, and particularly if you have clear cubes so that you can actually see the number, that's probably even better, but I don't have clear cubes. Okay, so let's roll our third die. 1. Okay, so we're looking for a 4. Now, if we look at row number 1, we don't have any 4s along there. If we look at column 1, we do have a 4 here. So maybe what we want to do is use this as column 1 and hope that we get a 3. Well, what happens if we don't get a 3? Well, that's going to determine whether we've underset or overset our pin. So we're hoping for a 3. We got a 3. Excellent. So we've got 4 and 4, and that adds up to 8 plus 1 is 9. So we've successfully set our pin. So we'll get to undersetting and oversetting and moving intersections down the road, but for now we've successfully set pin number 1. So we're going to cross off the 2 values that we used. We can reset our binding track, and what we do is we're going to rotate this pin to the set side, and we've successfully set pin 1. We've pushed that pin up to the shear line. The technical terms are in the rule book if you're curious a little bit more about how this all works, but for now all we need to know is that we've set pin number 1. So now we go back to pin number 2, our first pin in the binding order. Now we go back to pin number 1, and we're going to write another B to check for binding, and we're going to check if pin 1 is binding again. 5. So we have an opportunity to roll again. Now the maximum number of dice you can roll on this binding track is 4. If you roll 4 dice and you've landed on a dash for the 4th time, then you move your marker to the next pin, mark another B, but you don't have to take a time penalty as though you've landed on a red stopwatch. So just a minor point there. So our second die was 6, so we go up to 11. So unfortunately, we've landed on a stopwatch, and that means that pin 1 is not binding again. So we're going to mark another X, reset that. Now we're going to check pin 3 if it's binding. So we're going to put a B here. 5. So we go down to spot 5. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. So pin 3 is binding, so that means we put a 2 here because it's the second pin to be binding. And now we're going to mark an S here because we're going to set it, and we get to reveal what the binding pick height is. Ooh, it's 3. Okay, that's very low. So what we don't want to do is have our deep pick for that lift height for that pin. So what we want to do is we want to change our pick to probably the -1. So that's going to cost us 2 to change our pick. And because we'd already crossed off one of the tension icons, we're going to check for tension again. Ideally, we want to keep this in the middle, so we want to go for a 4 to a 6, which is quite difficult, but it's doable. Or we could go for 7 to an 11. That would also, these X's mean that the tension marker stays where it is. It doesn't move left or right. Okay, so what do we have here? We got 5, whoops, that was 5. 9 plus 5 is 14. That's no good. Let's re-roll all 3 of these. Okay, so we've got 5 plus 5 is 10. We have enough so that we're not going to get 12 or 11, but let's see if we can get a 6. That would be even better. Yes, so we've got 2, 4, 6 total. So that means we can mark off the lowest track here. And that means we don't have to move the tension marker. And that means that we could also roll a 7 to an 11 next time, which is easier than rolling a 4 to a 6, and we'd still not have to move that tension marker. So thinking ahead a little bit about down the road. All right, so we've marked an S, we've marked P's for changing our pick. So what we're looking for now are intersections that add up to 4, because we're going to subtract 1 from the pick height. Let's start rolling 1 at a time. In our setting grid, 5. Okay, what does 5 look like? 2, 4, 4, 6, 1, 6. Those are pretty high. 3, 5, 2, 4, 1, 2. Well, there's 2 2s and a 1 and a 3. I think we're going to go for row 5 for the first intersection. 4. Okay, so 5 and 4 is 4. That's no good unless we got a 0, but that's quite difficult to do. So I'm not going to choose this row. I'm going to choose column ahead for intersection B. 2. So do we want this spot? That's 5. That would overset the pins, which means we'd have to start setting the pins again from the beginning, which would be bad. Or do we want 4 and 2? Yes, that's a value of 2. So that's the spot that we're looking at right there, that 2. And then we're hoping for a 2 or a way to get to a 2. 2. Okay, so our intersection is 2 and 5. Now, if we were to keep it at that, that would be 7 minus 1 is 6. Obviously, that's higher than 3. So that would be oversetting the pins, in which case what we would do is we would erase the grid, reset this pin to be unset, and this one still would be unset, and we'd have to start again trying to set this pin. Fortunately, we don't have to do that because we have another mechanism that allows us to move the intersection 1 space orthogonally. So because there's a 2 beside this intersection, what we can do is we can mark an M for moving. It costs us 1 time space because our tension is at 1, and we're going to move our intersection over 1. So now we're at 2 and 2, minus 1 is 3. Perfect. So I'm going to mark off those spots, 2 and 2, and we've set our second pin. Now we can't forget that we marked off a space with the tension adjustment on it, so let's adjust our tension. 10, that's 15. I'm going to re-roll these ones. That's 15 again. Oof, even worse. That's 16. Okay, so we have to mark off this space here and move our tension 1 to the side. Now, if we were going to move an intersection with the tension here, we would have to put in 2 M's in order to move an intersection. We could move both intersections 1 space orthogonally each, but that would cost us 4 total movement points or time points. So let's go back to pin number 1 and check that one for binding again. So we're going to go B, and we're almost at halfway through our time. 2, 5 is 7. Okay, so that one pin is not binding. We're going to mark an X as a time penalty and check pin number 4. Check it for binding, but first we got to do the tension. Roll. And this time we could get an 18 to a 24 because that would move us 2 spaces over to that other 2. So that's 10, 15, 17. You know what? I'm going to go for that. 5, so that's 10, 16, 20. Okay, so we're going to mark off this space and move our tension over this way. And then I'm hoping that in the future, we could roll a 4 to a 6, a 7 to an 11, or an 18 to a 24, and that would still keep us within the range. If we rolled a 12 to a 17, that would be bad. That would move our tension marker out of range. That would mean that our tension is all messed up. We'd have to reset our pins to be set again, similar to oversetting on the setting grid. Okay. So we're going to check for binding. 4, good. I like to see a 4 right off the bat. That means that this pin is binding. So we're going to say that's our 3rd pin. Now 7 is medium height. I think we want to change our pick height back to 0. I don't think we want to subtract 1 when trying to reach a 7, because that would mean we would need to get an 8, which is doable. Maybe let's not spend the 2 time spaces to change that back. We'll just take this into consideration. Okay, so now we got to set our 3rd pin here, which is actually pin 4, a 6. So what are we looking for? We're looking for an 8 total. Well, there's some pretty high numbers down here. There's also some high numbers down here, but there's also 0 and a 2, a 2 and a 1. Let's do a 6 as the row. 4. That's 3. Or we could do this one. I think let's bank the 3. No, let's do row 4 and row 6. 5. Okay, so we're at 6 or 1. I don't think 1 helps us at all. So let's go for this intersection here. So that's a value of 6. So now we need a value of 2 or fewer. That's going to be hard. Let's see what we get. 1. Okay, so that is this intersection here. So we've got a 5 and a 6. Can we move any of them 1 unit in order to make 8? We can. Okay, so we're going to move this intersection to the left 1 and end up with a 3 and a 5. That's going to cost us 2 on the tension. So we're going to go 1, 2. Now, a minor point, if you end up rolling to adjust your tension in the middle of moving, you finish moving the intersection first, whether that's 1 or 2 tension adjustments that you're writing over top of. You finish the intersection adjustments and then you adjust your tension, which is a little bit different than writing for checking for binding or setting on the grid. Those ones you typically adjust the tension first. So we spent 2, we moved our intersections. We can cross off 5 and 3. Minus 1 is 7. So we've set that pin. And now we need to check the tension. Let's aim for a 4 or a 6. It's not a very good start. We could also aim for, what we don't want is a 12 to a 17. I'm going to roll these ones again. So that's 5, 6, 7, 8. That's keeping it where it is. I think that's fine. Let's just keep it where it is. All right, now we're going to check pin 1 for binding again. One, 1, 2. 3, 4. Now we still have our powers that we could use. Once per game, we can either re-roll a die, add one or subtract 1 to 1 die, or pick 2 intersections away for no time cost. Because I really want to get this pin set, it's our second to last pin. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend this one, subtract 1 from any of these dice, and go back to number 4. And we're going to say this is the 4th pin that's binding. With these powers, you can change any of the dice that are currently being used in that mechanism. So if you're setting the grid, you could change any of the dice. It doesn't have to be the most recently rolled die. Okay, so now we're going to try and set this pin number 1, which is our 4th pin to be set. So, we need to check, of course, what our lift height is. 5. Okay, so that's decent. I think I'm going to leave it at a -1 as well. So we're looking for intersections that add up to 6. 4. Intersections that add up to 6. I think I'm going to do column 4. What happens if we land an intersection on something that's crossed out? In that case, you have to move it. You have to spend time cost based on what your tension is currently set at. 1. I don't want 4 and 1, but I might want row 1 here. Column 1 is a bit tricky because there's already 3 crossed off there. 5. Do we want 1 and 5, which is a 2, or do we want 4 and 5, which is a 4? I think let's go 4 and 5, which is a 4, and if we have to, we can always shift it over to 1 to be lower than the value of 5. If we do that and the intersections plus or minus the pick height is less than the lift height of the card, then you just try again. You write another S on the timesheet and try again. All right, what's our final intersection? Okay, so we've got 4 and 5. Is that 4 there? So we're looking for a 2. Okay, that's a 3. Okay, so what can we do here? So this is 3, so we've got this intersection here. 3 and a 4, that's 7 minus 1 is 6, that's too high. So we need to reduce this. We can't reduce it with this one unless we want to use this power. We're at our second to last pin, so maybe let's use this power. Pick 2 away at no time cost. We're going to pick 1, whoops, yeah, we could go over here. 1, 2, and 4 is 6 minus 1 is 5. So we'll do that, no time cost, and we'll mark off that one and that one. 4 plus 2 minus 1 is 5. So this card is now set. And we have only 1 pin left, so we don't actually have to check it for binding because we know that it's going to be number 5 in our sequence. We can just mark it number 5, check what the lift height is. It's 8. Okay, so that is on the higher side. So I think I am going to change our pick height. So I'm going to spin 2 PP to go to a +1, and then we're going to be looking for a 7 on our setting grid. So we've marked off one of the tension icons. So we're looking for a 4 to a 6 or an 18 to a 24. The other two would be very bad. So 12 plus 6, 18. Let's just take that. We have some space left before the end of the game. And we are going to look for a 7 on the grid. 1. I think we have to do row 1. 3. 1 and 3 is a 3. That looks pretty safe. So let's do that. Oh, we should have written an S here for to setting. 6. All right, there's no 4s along that one, but there are 4s beside it that we could move to. I think I'm going to do that. There's lots of options there. Let's just see what we get. So our first intersection is here. 5. Our second intersection is here. Now 3 plus 2 is 5. What we're looking for is 7. What we could do is we can move this 1 space and this 1 space. And now we have 6 and 1. That's going to cost us 4 on the tension track. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 6 plus 1 plus 1 is 8. And we have officially won the game of lockpick. And the final thing we need to do is score our game. So 8 points per pin picked. That's 5 pins. It's 40 points. 1 per remaining time spot. We only had 2 time spots remaining. 5 per unused power. We didn't re-roll, so we get 5 points for that. 5 points for a 2 or a 3 height pin. We did have a 3 height pin, and because that's extra challenging, we get 5 points for that. 5 points for balanced tension. We did not end the game with balanced tension. We're off to the right a little bit, so 0 for that. And 4 for no pick changes, 0 for that as well, because we did change our pick a couple times. So that is 52 points, which is a very respectable score. The maximum theoretical score, which would be extremely difficult to get, I believe is 100 points. And that's with all 6 pins being picked, lots of remaining time, and no powers used, a 2 and a 3 height pin, and balance tension, and no pick changes. And that's lockpick.